Welcome back to the Sandwich Generation Pod. I'm Robin.
And I'm Elisa.
And today we're doing a mini episode. We're talking to someone who is trying to revolutionize the in-home care landscape.
His name is Neal Shah, and he's been called America's Chief Eldercare Officer. He's a researcher with Johns Hopkins and the NIH and the CEO of CareYaya, a platform helping families find affordable senior care.
He's also a bit of an influencer. That's how we found him on the Instagram. And his handle is Neal K. Shah, if you want to learn more about the cost of caregiving and what's happening in this country.
Let's get into it.
Let's. The way you look on the internet.
Yes, this is our uniform. We wear it every day. You know, like our whole team wears these CareYaya scrubs. And it's like a solidarity with the caregivers. You know, we run a workforce of 50,000 caregivers around the country. That's like my day job, you know. So I kind of make these videos on the side. And it's kind of cool that the videos are taking off.
We're two moms.
We're in it. We are actually in our caregiving era, the Sandwich Generation. And we've just really loved your account and your advice and everything that you've been doing. Because even though you're like, I make these videos on the side, that's a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of work. And especially like in between running your actual company that you just said provides caregiving for 50,000.
Yeah, we run a very large workforce of healthcare students, pre-medical and nursing students across the country that are caring for older adults in their communities. And it was a social impact project I started where it's called a company, but we don't make any money. You know, we run it for free. Like we run all the booking and scheduling technology, do all the verifications, background checking, everything. And then we make the student workforce available to families at cost, you know, in terms of families pay the students directly. And I started that because I thought that within caregiving, there was just this ridiculous gap. You know, people could not get affordable care. And there was a lot of challenges with quality and reliability, et cetera, that I experienced myself, you know, during my own caregiving journey. And I just thought, you know, there's a way you could innovate your way out of it. So, yeah. That's kind of my main thing. So I started making the videos just as like a creative outlet, you know, of not just my own lived experience of caregiving, but all the families we're helping and seeing what all they're going through. And I think caregiving is like one of the biggest stories that needs to be told, because by raising awareness, you might be able to shift the way government thinks about it, the way employers think about it, and maybe broadly the way society thinks about it. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
We're clapping. This is what got my attention. Somebody sent me your content. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? There's someone in scrubs talking about this? This is amazing. They look very important. They look like someone the government would listen to.
Yeah, well, they do. The government funds our work, so it's kind of cool. NIH is like very focused on caregiving. I'd say the Administration for Community Living is also very focused on caregiving. I think the goal now is to get CMS and just Medicare broadly focusing on caregiving, which I feel like they want to do, but so far the industry hasn't bothered to get them to do, you know, because the industry is supporting caregiving at very high prices, and Medicare is like, I can't pay $40 an hour for in-home care, you know, and cut deals with like a million different organizations to do that. So I think that it's been a chicken or the egg where like somebody has to innovate to advance affordable care and then prove out to Medicare that getting people with in-home care support is going to result in a reduction of hospital visits, reduction of ER utilization, things like that. And then I think if they view it as like positive ROI, I feel like they will do it. So that's been at least my personal mission, is like to get them not just in an idealistic framework, but also in a practical framework of, hey, you guys will save money if you focus on caregiving. Then, you know, people will start
1,000%. I agree so much.
Yes. Like the amount of people that have actually just like texted me or like in my orbit that are like, okay, this crisis just happened and we're just trying to get someone to come in and care for my parents. And I know the number is $40 an hour is where you start with home care. So it's like, who's got that for around the clock care? Run the numbers and you're bankrupt in like 2 seconds. Okay, let's say you have recently hired someone in home to help with either your aging parents or your children, like a nanny. And then tax time comes around and you realize, oh, wait a minute, what do I do here? Because guess what? The IRS actually considers you to be an employer if you've hired people to help you in home. So that's where Poppin's Payroll comes in.
They handle the payroll, the taxes, and help you with all the paperwork. So those of us who are sandwiched have more time to care for our families and those around us.
It's $49 a month, which I think is super approachable. And especially to deal with all of your payroll and tax anxieties, I feel like that's a great price.
It really is an easy button. And they have so generously given our listeners a code to try Poppins Payroll for 1 month free. Use the code SANDWICH when you sign up at popinspayroll.com.
I did want to just ask really quick, what is your caregiving point of reference? Like, tell us your story.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually have a non-traditional background. Prior to starting CareYaya, I was working in finance. I very rapidly entered the industry in my 20s and became a partner at a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund when I was 27. And I had a really good run of returns. And by 31, one of the investors backed me to start my own fund. So I grew that from 10 million to 250 million. That was what I was doing with my career by the time I was 35. In my early 30s, I became a caregiver. Well, it's
a starving artist, so we're on opposite sides of the spectrum. Neal.
Yeah. Well, I've subsequently, this is why I'm running CareYaya, is like I took whatever I'd earned from that and spent it on this, because I became a caregiver twice. So in my early 30s, my grandfather went through a very prolonged dementia, cancer, and then end-of-life journey. And I was the person in my family initially coordinating all of his care. My parents rely on me to figure things out, So I kind of did that. And that was my eye-opening experience of just how broken the home care system is, how under-supported it is, the quality of the care, let alone the cost. It's how much these companies are paying the care workers or how little. So after years of that, with all the guilt and strain, my mom ended up just quitting her career to become my grandpa's full-time caregiver, which had its own second-order impacts on her, After he passed, she was never able to re-enter the workforce. So after, going through that multi-year journey, I was running my fund and I just became obsessed with caregiving. I was like, this is unbelievable how bad this is. While I was still controlling a fund, I was like, I should invest in companies that are doing a good job here. I literally surveyed the landscape for over a year. There were none.
Wow.
So it was kind of like a back of mind idea of hey, one day I would like to figure out what to do here. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to think because at the peak of my fund, my wife became severely ill and went through a multi-year cancer battle. So then I became her primary caregiver. So through dementia and cancer for my grandfather, I'd been secondary caregiver, but for my wife, I was primary caregiver. And I took several sabbaticals for my work to manage her care and made a very difficult decision after a while to shut down my fund to become her full-time caregiver because there was 50-50 odds of her dying.
Sure.
And then I did that for 2 years, was a full-time caregiver. Knock on wood, she finally had a successful outcome and has now been in remission for several years. And and then at that point, I'd basically walked away from my career and I'd worked very hard to build that career. And I'd walked away to do caregiving. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was in my late 30s. And that's when I shifted and said, I'm going to focus on caregiving. So initially started CareYaya with a bunch of savings and a bunch of skills that I've learned. I'm just going to focus on where I think I can make impact. So I started this organization to support caregivers, to connect caregivers with affordable care resources, to start doing innovations to improve care. Subsequently, I've been very grateful that ended up attracting a lot of funding and collaboration interest from Johns Hopkins, which actually initially funded a bunch of our work. So I kind of became a Hopkins-funded researcher, which in the year they ran that program, I was the only outsider, that got funding, which is amazing. And then subsequently ended up getting a bunch of projects funded through the NIH directly, specifically National Institute on Aging funds a lot of our work. So beyond just connecting people with affordable caregiving, we've also developed dementia caregiver training tools that many family caregivers are using. We've developed a bunch of other loneliness and isolation related projects to help older adults who are in the community who can't afford caregivers. So we've done a bunch of social impact innovation, and then we've attracted all these kind of mission-driven organizations along the way. I have kind of a non-traditional background in it, which is primarily from my lived experience. And now I'm running this massive workforce, of 50,000 students around the country, and seeing so many stories of what families are going through, and also positive stories. The 20-year-olds and 22-year-olds are waking up to this crisis, and I think that is really awesome because they're going to go out into the world, and many of them are going to become doctors and nurses one day, and they're going to take this with them and hopefully catalyze change.
I feel very deeply about the fact that we are in such a care crisis in America right now, and that doesn't change overnight. And so it's this work like you're doing that gives me hope for change and also for our future, for our aging eventually. We got to do something.
Yeah.
We talk about the money all the time because Elisa's parents ran out of money. They're both of our parents are both in assisted living. So if you can imagine, my parents are running a $1,000 a month bill now.
Wow.
And don't have that money put away.
Yeah.
And so we're running on borrowed time. And we just did a huge episode on medical assistance. Thank you.
For long-term care in Minnesota, which is where we're based. And
which I realize doesn't exist in all states, because that's something that's unique to Minnesota, where people can actually get relief from the government. But otherwise, people don't really have a choice, and the cost of care is higher in other states.
Yep.
Yeah.
So through CareYaya, can people go and plug in where they live and see if it's available in their area?
People can go to the site and plug in, if they want to see if we're active in the area. And if we're not active, we're happy to open it. We're like a pretty grassroots organization. Our biggest areas currently are our headquarters is in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. So we're like pretty big here. And then we're pretty active in like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, parts of Florida. Even one-off, like University of Michigan, a bunch of students wanted to build it, so we let them kind of like mobilize it there. UT Austin is a big one, so DC is a big one. But we're trying to kind of take it nationally, because I think one of the coolest things I didn't expect is there's overwhelming interest from young people to want to step up and help people. Which is great news. It's like makes me I'm middle-aged, right? I'm in my mid-40s now. So it makes me optimistic about the future that a bunch of 20 and 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds like care about this stuff. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. We always say this is not sexy stuff. We always say that. But
Agreed. Yeah.
But it's universal, and there's so many people going through it, and maybe it's a grandparent that's gone through it, or a parent.
Exactly.
I mean, so many people are suffering out there.
Sure.
What would it look like if someone accessed your organization? Like, what could they find, and how could it help?
The main thing from a caregiver perspective, like if people just wanted to kind of book care, the organization operates almost like an Uber, where you can go online, you can find, schedule, book, review, pay caregivers near you. So through the main site, that's how the organization works. So, and by the way, that in most markets, it's like 30 to 50% lower cost than through the agencies, because there's no markup. So in like Minneapolis area, it'd be $20 an hour. In some of these markets, I'm still learning. Where in San Francisco, we're running it at $20 an hour, and all that money goes to the students. In San Francisco, some of these companies are charging 50. I was like, I couldn't believe that. Can you imagine, like, if you need 40 hours a week of care support and the prevailing rate is 50, that's over $100,000 a year. We just
got these quotes for ourselves like 3 months ago, because the assisted living place that we were in was going to require us to have 24-hour care within the facility. And they're like, and you can just do that on your own. You have to do it in order to stay.
Yeah, and then you do the math.
And then it was the minimum was $40 an hour. We're like, fuck you.
So that's our main, kind of like line of work, is growing the caregiving platform. But because we are running it for free, like, we're often trying to figure out, okay, how do we get funding to keep sustaining it? And we didn't want to charge any fees or markups, because that was the whole point of starting it. So then on the side, we also do a bunch of innovation projects through which we get a lot of foundation grants, social impact funds, and even National Institute on Aging funds. And frankly, a lot of those projects also make impacts. Actually, the one thing being used in Minnesota a lot is we launched a project for anyone who's been denied health insurance claims, which we found a lot of family caregivers were experiencing. So we built an AI system, which is now live, and it's grant funded, and tons of people are using it. It's free. It's at counterforcehealth.org. And that's something where if you have an insurance claim denial, you can go upload your denial letter and any background info, and it crafts like a very robust appeal for you. And we've overturned now, through that work, we've overturned like over $30 million of denied claims. Like, people have gotten.
Yeah, I'm like, I could use that literally
What is that called again?
Counterforcehealth.org. It's kind of funny. We put a logo of like a fist where it's like we're punching back against the system, because I feel like the system is so broken, and it's like these insurance companies are getting away with murder, in my opinion. So yeah, it's called counterforcehealth.org. We had some cool stuff. Like, there was this elderly couple in a rural area in Illinois, and she had kidney cancer, and the tumor removal procedure was denied twice by the insurer. And they were panicking because they didn't have $48,000 to come up with that and pay out of pocket. So they were just like not doing it. And then her husband heard about this thing, went to the site, used it, and they won. So she ended up getting
amazing.
So I feel like, to be honest, it's both cool. It also shows you how, in my opinion, like, frustrating these insurance companies are. Like, they know better. They're doing it, to create a burden on you. So yeah, that's been a cool project. So we're almost like a lab that launches all these social impact innovations based on problems we're hearing from caregivers, and it hopefully reduces the strain on family caregivers, because these are real life experiences that people are dealing with.
So you have this internet presence where you cover so many topics. You give such great advice.
Thank you.
Let's talk, and I think we had kind of talked about approaching the topic of guilt, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen so many caregivers, so many families, the medical students. And we're talking here about the sandwich generation, but how...
And we feel guilty all the
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
Because we are literally sandwiched, literally choosing between our small children and our parents. And it never feels like we can be doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah. Like every caregiver feels guilt. In both of my caregiving experiences, I felt a tremendous amount of guilt.
I kind of want to hear why you still feel guilty before you give the 3 tips. What's your guilt about?
I think your guilt is always about could have done more, could have spent more time finding better care for my grandfather, and maybe he would have lived 6 months longer. Maybe my mom wouldn't have had to quit her job, and maybe we could have found good care and she wouldn't have felt guilty. I mean, her quitting her job 10 years later has an impact, right? Like never able to go back into her career. And so I think that those kind of guilt you feel, even with my own wife's care, I felt like, what if I'd taken longer sabbaticals or quit my work faster? Then maybe some of those treatments could have been avoided and there would have been recovery faster. In caregiving, there's so much second guessing about could have done more. And I think that, that's just something, where you can't you can't remake those decisions. So I still think about that a bunch. Try not to.
So what are your tips?
Okay,
Tell us how to...
The main tip is I think most individual people are trying the best that they can given the cards they've been dealt. Instead of guilt, channel it into social change, and external change, because the system is not supporting at all. In all of the work that I've seen, employers are not supporting, government is not supporting. So how much can one person actually bear without breaking themselves? Frankly, even a lot of my own guilt, stress, anxiety, all of the challenges and negative emotions around caregiving, I channel into, hey, I'm going to do all this because that's going to be my therapy or healing. I'm just going to try.
That's why we're doing this podcast. 100%.
We do this.
Yeah. It's what can we make?
Awesome.
What kind of positive change, or what can we make, or how can we help people not go through the hardship that we've had to face? And I know there's so many people out there who have it harder than us too, and but care shows up in different ways for everyone at times when it's never convenient.
I agree. And I am surprised that people haven't mobilized. I think that there's so many of us out there, current caregivers or people who have recently done intense caregiving. If we mobilize, the change would happen tomorrow. Yeah.
I think it's coming because I think the wave of baby boomers and the children that are going to be caring for them, we're on the front end of that, which is why I think we're we need to send the signal out. You guys, there is a tsunami coming.
Yes.
And you don't even know about it.
You're right. You're
over here,
Yeah. One thing I've noticed that's very positive is that celebrities are starting to embrace this. Have you noticed within the last year how many people are starting to in prominent positions and with a lot of audience and platform are, talking about these topics. And I think that's 1,000%. Part of, the social trend is when everybody's dealing with it and you're oh, that's just me. Oh, that's just my friend. But then when a bunch of prominent people start talking about it, you're hey, this is all of us, and this isn't easy for anyone.
Because you think you're the only one who's not resourced. You think you're the only one whose parents didn't plan, who you didn't plan. You don't know what to do. You really, it's sort of I was embarrassed at first. I was just oh my God, I'm so embarrassed that my parents didn't plan more or that I don't know enough about insurance or that I don't know enough, that we don't have a legal team. I just felt sort of some shame around the sudden struggles that we were facing. Yeah. Especially because it felt like no one else around me was going through it. But
then you realize that there's a whole system that is failing us, which kind of comes back to what you were saying, Neal, about how yes, it feels like you're the only one. And then you realize, oh, we are not designed in this country for this. We're not set up for success here. We've got a lot of things against us more than for us as caregivers.
I agree. And I think that the other kind of thing, I think in some way to give grace to the system, even though I do think it needs a dramatic reform, is that I think in the last maybe 3 decades, maybe 4 decades or whatever, because of advances in medicine, people are living a lot longer, but not necessarily in the last few years, living necessarily healthier, combined with just a bunch of trends on chronic illness, diabetes, et cetera, you're having an explosion of the number of people that need care for 5+ years now is so much larger than 20, 30 years ago, combined
when it was
with
1 to 2 years.
Exactly. And combined with, after a lot of people forget, after the baby boom, there was a baby bust in this country and globally too, but definitely in the US, right? Like you had this wave of births from post World War II until about like 1960 or so, for like you had this large population cohort being born. But then you had a big decline in births because of people like delaying marriage, birth control, things like that. So there are not enough middle-aged people in the country to care for this overwhelming amount of older people. And it's not when the boomers turn 65, it's really when the boomers start turning 80. And if you do the math, post World War II, like 2026 is the first year of oldest boomers hitting 80. So I think in the next 5 years, like by 2030, the stat that there's more older people in the country than kids, first time in history, right? So you have like this weird like demographic trend that I think is going to create a caregiving crisis where you not only have a lot more older people who are now living much longer, but oftentimes the last 5 to 10 years of their life, they can't care for themselves. And you don't have that many people in middle age and younger age that are there in the society to care for them. So how are you going to deal with this? Yeah, I think it's going to be a major issue.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so much we could talk about. So let's go back. I think you offered one tip. What's another one that you could offer? And we're going to try to give some silver linings here too to our sandwiched people, because we need hope and we need levity, right? Okay.
Yeah.
What's the second tip?
Silver lining? I'd say, I think one kind of like hope. So from a hope perspective, I think there's way more resources now. Even when I was like in the most intense part of caregiving, I'd say, frankly, over the last 2-3 years, resources have changed dramatically in terms of like a way to navigate care. Like, what do you do for your loved one at home with dementia? I mean, 5 years ago, it was Google and reading blogs or nothing, maybe YouTube. Now there is an abundance of like things you can figure out. And, you can find people on Instagram. You can go to TikTok. You can go to YouTube. There's like caregiver support. So I think there's way more digital resources available. So I think that's a positive. I think the conversation is more normalized. So I think that there are way, way more caregiver support groups. I'd say number one, I would just suggest everyone join a caregiver support group. I mean, I know it's obvious, but you'd be surprised how many caregivers I've met that don't join one.
We're not in one.
No.
What?
No, because I'm always afraid
I don't have time.
Not gonna,
Guys.
And, and I'm always like afraid I'm not going to find the right one and I'm going to feel awkward.
No, I mean, there's no downside. Then you can just leave and join another one. But I would say I found it to be very, very helpful because mainly, I guess,
So
and
that's
it
a
might be
to-do
different.
that we have.
It might be
Homework.
different based on your situation, but I found, when I was in my mid-30s as a male working in finance, there was no caregiver support from anyone I knew, right? If anything, no one wanted to talk about it. It was just like, hey, you become kind of unpopular at parties and at, group dinners because it's
Shove it under the rug,
mid-30s male is going to be like, oh, let's talk about that. So I think that I found caregiver support group to be like an unbelievable refuge because there were other people like me. They could be of any age and any gender or whatever, but over time you find, there's other people almost exactly like me going through this. So I'd say I'm surprised you guys aren't in one.
We need to start our own sandwich. We need to start our own sandwich support group, caregiver, in our spare time. In our spare time.
Yeah. But that was going to be recommendation number one is join one. Join one because it's very helpful. And there's so many more available now than there were because of the pandemic and because of Zoom and all this virtual, like you can even join it virtually. You don't even have to physically go in person, So I think that's
true. There are so many more resources, you're right, and access to to things.
Agreed.
Yeah.
What are your other comments or tips around guilt for caregivers?
I guess I probably gave like the most, it's like, what can you do? You guys are in the same, situation right now. What can you do? There's a limited amount of time,
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that you would have for I don't know how much you have worked with sandwich caregivers, but I do see you talking a lot about that. So I have a 4 and a 5-year-old, and Elisa's almost like, well, not a newborn, but a baby.
6 and a 1-year-old.
Yeah. And then our parents are both in assisted living. Are there any resources or tips or anything that you might want to offer or sentiments to like the sandwiched people?
No, great question. Sentiment is like you guys are like doing a lot, it's like take some time to care for yourself. I know that's just a saying, but I think sandwiches. That's the majority of the people we help are sandwiched, because we're running all these digital tools and people reaching out to us are trying to get care for parents while managing for their kids. And I think that I think sandwich it's a unique situation now. I think that this existed, of course, throughout history. But if you think about going back 50 years, many people had kids younger, so when they were 25, and then the prior generation had it then too, so that your parents were 50. So it's almost like you had time to raise your kids, and then your parents, crisis hit, and people did not live for very long periods in that intense health crisis. So I think all of these factors have created this new thing, which is people in their 40s and 50s are dealing with this. I mean, I don't, to be honest, I feel like that's one of the biggest areas for advocacy is that. I think a lot of employers are not supporting sandwich caregivers. I think government is certainly not doing anything. So, I mean, I hate to say it, there's not much out there. I would hope that sandwich caregivers can mobilize to create the change we need. But I think this is going to become a big growing issue, and a lot of people are going to drop out of the workforce. That's one main thing we see is
I agree.
How many sandwich people are dropping out of the workforce. Yeah.
Being a caregiver changes you for so many reasons.
Yeah.
But then when you're trying to maintain your work and work like you normally do while being sandwiched, like it doesn't work. And so that's actually like on our to-do list of how we can well, but how we can also like educate and like grow, just even not that we have any magical tips, but it's like we have this experience and there needs to be more support for people in the workforce that are sandwiched. And also it benefits the companies because they keep their employees longer. Like it's a win-win
I think
for
it's
everyone.
easier in some way. I think it's easier to change the companies first than to change the government. So where might caregiver support come out of first might be companies first, because they might be like, I'm going to lose my middle-aged employees who have built up all this knowledge base when they tap out to start doing caregiving. And the way childcare was, right? Like childcare in the 90s and 90s was like, there wasn't much offered, but then the companies realized, hey, I need to offer this because I'm going to lose like great workers. And the movement, it's like childcare, it's not perfect. I think there's a lot that could be improved, but compared to where it was 30 years ago, it's way better now, way more supported by a lot of employers who have like childcare benefits, who sometimes, or, some of the large employers, at least I live in North Carolina, but like some of the large employers near us run childcare on site, where you have like a IBM campus with a Bright Horizons on it, so that would have been unheard of in 1980s and 1990s. So I think that elder care and caring for aging parents is like that, where it's like clear it's going to be a big need. It's already a big need for people, but the companies have not addressed it. So I think that awareness is a good step, to getting HR departments to focus on the topic.
I know we're running over time, but I am just curious my last question, because we're talking about this, and I think we get questions about this. What do you think would be the change what would you suggest to because you come from an organizational point of view, like what would be the suggestions you would give, or larger businesses and organizations, what kind of systemic change would they make, like childcare?
Similar to childcare for aging care, I'd say probably number one is, I know, so my perspective is during the COVID pandemic, some of the large employers cut deals with these like caregiver resource navigation organizations to say, if you're caring for an aging parent, I'll get like a social worker on a call with you to help you navigate, or like a care navigator. I think that was not exactly what people needed, because I think people just need the actual break. So I think that where I think employers can focus on this is literally just like curating a list of, I have respite care providers for you, and I will give you partial reimbursement for using them. I think it's just like a very simple, easy thing to do. It's saying, hey, you need help to keep your job and keep working, but your dad needs care. Okay, you know what? I will go use my purchasing power to go do deals with companies that can provide care. And you book and pay and just submit receipts, and I'll reimburse you for X amount, or I'll create some tax deferred amounts that you can do. I think that would go a long, long way, because you're helping with affordability and you're reducing the person's kind of going out and finding resources on their own. So I think that's like kind of probably the easiest thing you can do. And then things with like assisted living placement and things like that, same thing. If they can kind of help you reduce the burden by kind of like using their resources to vet and cut deals, with some providers, I think that's a lot, because then it's like less work for you. And I think that's a very easy lift for any large employer, even mid-sized employer, to do that. Just like the way, I mean, again, not that the analogy is exact, because I think health insurance has its own flaws. But imagine like how easy it is for IBM or Cisco or one of these big companies to go to Blue Cross Blue Shield and get a health insurance deal and then pass that through to you, as opposed to if you individually went, your pricing would be way worse.
Right.
So I think if they cut a deal like that with the way they've been doing with Bright Horizons and childcare, I think they could easily do that with care for aging parents. And I think that would go a long way towards at least showing that you're a caregiving friendly workplace, which I feel like every employer should want to showcase that. But also you're doing actually a good value add for your employees. So I think that's an easy lift.
I love that. Those are great. You've given so much to us in a half an hour. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope to continue the dialogue anytime.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you for your
Thank
work.
you so much.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you can take away some helpful info and tips. All links and resources can be found in our show notes.
Please share this episode with anyone you think this might help. And if you have a topic that you'd like to talk more with us about in the sandwich generation world, please slide into our DMs on Instagram. Our handle is @thesandwichgenerationpod. We hope you'll be back for more convos with us soon. And remember, no matter whose diaper you're changing, you're never alone.
That was great. That was really good. All right.